Bryony Gordon, welcome to the Great Big Book Club.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting. I wish I was actually with you in your, it looks like you've got a nice study library there.
Oh, I'd love you to be here.
I'm missing, face-to-face human contact a little bit, aren't you?
Absolutely, we all are. But listen, look at this. This is your fantastic book called Glorious Rock Bottom, and it's already a Sunday Times bestseller.
Yes, it is. It's a bit weird. It's been such a weird thing because it was supposed to come out in May, and obviously I don't know if you saw, but there was this pandemic, so it got put back, and it's been a really weird thing. It's it's come out, but it feels, I don't know, it's strange. All of the stuff I've been doing for it to promote it, and God, I'm so lucky that people want to talk about it, has been, in my underwear from home, and so it's weird, and I keep having this moment where I'm like, oh my God, it got to the Sunday Times bestsellers list. That's mad. It doesn't feel real somehow. But anyway, it's a nice feeling, especially given that it sort of comes from such absolutely fucking abject fuckwittery.
It really, well, I wouldn't go that far, but it is a very honest account of your battle with alcoholism, and it's quite punchy, and it's quite graphic, and it's very heartfelt, and it really hits you right here. I mean, tell me, what was it like to actually write it?
Writing it was fine, weirdly. Obviously, experiencing it was awful. And that's the weird thing, is that of all the books I've written, and I haven't written masses, but this is my 5th book, and this was the one that I genuinely felt it was the easiest to write. It kind of fell out of me, and I don't, and I think that's because the stuff I was writing about, I'd already sort of, people often talk about, was writing the book cathartic for you? And I'm like, no, it was terrible. It was bringing it, I had to bring it all back to life. But actually, I'd already done that kind of processing part because I was lucky enough to go to rehab. So, and I didn't want to touch the stuff until I was well into my sobriety. Of course, sobriety is, we're as sober as the day. Do you know what I mean? And it's never a given thing. But I don't feel ashamed of any of the stuff in the book anymore. I used to think I was the worst person in the world. I was a terrible mother because I couldn't stop drinking, even though I had this lovely, gorgeous daughter and lovely husband and everything else going for me. And that shame kept me really sick. And that's kind of why I wanted to write this book, because, I got sober and I realized that I was not the worst person in the world. I was just another ill person who sometimes did bad things because of that illness. And this stuff is really common. So, people have said to me, oh my God, it's really extreme, your book. And I'm like, well, it may be if you haven't experienced alcoholism, but to lots of people that have, it isn't at all. And yet we just don't talk about it. And that shame created from that keeps people really sick because they're just too horrified to be able to talk to anyone about it. And I know I am not a bad mum. I'm a really good mum now. I'm sober. I'll be 3 years sober on Thursday. And, and I do my best. And that wasn't me. Well, that was me. That was a version of me. But this shit happens, and it happens to lots of people, and either we want people to get better and lift them out of illness and all the people around them who are affected by the illness, or we don't want to talk about it, and we just kind of feel like everyone, just carry on existing in the dark. And I don't think that's any way to live.
There was somebody in your rehab centre which you went to who was doing exactly the same thing as you, about a mile down the road, who became actually your very great friend in the book. I mean, it's quite interesting because you've written quite a few, this is your 3rd confessional sort of memoir, isn't it? Yeah. And Did you, I mean, why did you decide to revisit the alcoholism? Is it because you realised that actually that was behind all the other bits and pieces, or was it facilitated, or?
Well, the writing, it's really interesting because the writing all of these books has helped me to get to this space of like really realising that I had, alcoholism. So my first book, The Wrong Knickers, was like this kind of crazy memoir about my crazy 20s. I wrote, when I was a new mum, and then I wrote Mad Girl, which was all about my OCD, which I've had since I was a little girl. And it was only through writing that really that I discovered I became this sort of accidental mental health campaigner, and became sort of immersed in this world of meeting people who knew, and learning so much about mental illness and the coping mechanisms for it and stuff. So and it was only through that really that I realized my drinking was not normal. Do you know what I mean? And that I knew my drinking wasn't normal, but I kind of, it was staring me in the face. And I kind of felt like it would have been really disingenuous for me not to have written about getting sober, because that was all part of my journey. And it sounds like so cliche, do you know what I mean? But I do think it's, life is a process, and it's a never-ending story, and you're constantly learning new things about yourself. And there will probably be things I'll look back on that I do right now that in 10 years time I'll be going, oh my God, how could you not see that you were I don't know, do you know what I mean? Like, but so we're all, I always say, like, everyone, I feel like we all wake up in the morning and go, how many layers of denial am I going to have to get dressed in to face the day, and this kind of like notion of what's normal. And so I felt it would have just been completely disingenuous not to write this book about how I used alcohol as a coping mechanism for my mental illness, which so many people do, because guess what? It's the only coping mechanism any of us are kind of learn as kids, like, oh, you've had a shit day, have a drink. And, alcohol, like, I'm not anti-alcohol, but I am anti us acknowledging the destructive effects it has on many people, not all people. Do you know what I mean? Like, there are plenty of people that can just have one drink, very nice for them, get on your way, like, get on with your life. But there are lots of us for whom that isn't an option, and for whom the consequences are really, really destructive. And so, I don't know where I've gone here, but so I also think alcoholism is a mental illness that's a kind of double whammy often of a mental illness, because you don't seek oblivion if you're happy, healthy, well. Do you know what I mean? And so so it was a really important part of the whole story that I needed to kind of explore and write about, if that makes sense.
Do you think the reason why you sort of lasted so long in the alcohol years is because you were competent, you did your work, you were basically a binge drinker, you weren't sort of full-time alcoholic, you didn't wake up in the morning and have a vodka, but
I'd wake up in the morning and be like, I'm never doing that ever again, like there was so much shame. And I was like, well, alcoholics don't try and stop, do they? And alcoholics, I had this notion of what an alcoholic was, and it was a man on a park bench swigging from a paper bag or something. And I had really strict rules for my drinking. We're like, don't have a drink until your daughter's asleep, and and don't drink spirits, or and it was like, I thought that I was controlling my drinking, but really it was controlling me. Like, in the end, it didn't really matter that I wasn't drinking round the clock, because I was thinking about drinking round the clock. Either I don't want to ever do it again, or when am I going to do it again? That was basically, you could split my life into those two things. Like, I don't want to drink ever again, into when can I have my next drink? And like, so I think that our notions of what an alcoholic is are very unhelpful and keep a lot of people sick. And I was like, how could I be an alcoholic? I have like blonde highlights, I do reformer Pilates, I've run a marathon, I've interviewed Prince Harry. I'm not an alcoholic. I've got a house in Clapham. And I'm like, no, babes, you are an alcoholic. And in the end, like, I kind of like the the effort of proving to myself that I wasn't an alcoholic was just sorry, I'm swearing too much, was just fucking exhausting. And it was so much easier just to accept that I was. And when I did, I was like, oh, thank God. Oh, that's what I am. I am an alcoholic, you know? And it's hard, and no one grows up wanting to be an alcoholic, obviously. But God, I'm so glad I've accepted it.
Well, I tell you who else is probably quite glad is your lovely husband, Harry,
Yeah.
who, I mean, how did he get so wise? I mean, he's such a sort of linchpin in your life, and he's stood by you through endless mistakes and things. I think he's going to be sainted in his next life.
Well, he always says you make me out to be this sort of like knight in shining armor, and I don't know, like like he did put up with a lot, but my counsellor always says to me, yes, but you must be giving him something, because otherwise why would he stick around? Like, you know, part of getting sober has been realizing that I'm not just a drain on everyone around me. Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't just tolerate me. And it's really funny, because I always used to think, because he's like the son of an army colonel, grew up in barracks, all of that, and I always used to say that he last expressed an emotion in 1983, whereas there's me, who's like weeping, wailing, whatever, and actually he's far more emotionally intelligent than I am. Like, he got all of this way before I did. He'd say to me, you're not a bad person, you're just an ill person who sometimes does bad things. And you know, like, maybe the universe delivered him to me so I could realize that about myself, you know. And yeah, he's great. He doesn't read anything I write. He doesn't want to know anything about it. And we know all about, you know, like, he's aware of where my, you know, drinking and drugging took me. But he sort of grounds me in, like, reality, and in, like, realizing that, you know, I'm just another person who sometimes fucks up. Do you know what I mean? Like, guess what? So does everyone. So yeah, he is like, he hates being painted as this sort of like saint, basically.
Well, sadly, I think you have painted him as a saint, because he's brilliant in the book. The thing about Memoir is that you know, it's got real people in it with real experiences, all from your perspective. I mean, how difficult is it to write a very explosive memoir like this when your mother is still alive? I mean, how did she cope with a reading? She's an old journalist, isn't she, your mum?
Yeah, well, she didn't think, when she first read it, she's like, I don't think that you should publish this. You know, are you sure? And that, to me, that reaction was why I knew I had to, you know, because, like, this shit happens. It happens everywhere, and it happens to people of my mum's generation, and it happens to people of my generation, and it will continue to happen, because, you know, that's life. And, you know, my thing about it is that I will never ever write about someone in a way that is exploitative or upsetting for them, ever, ever, ever. Like that, so very, you know, like, everyone else in my book are a kind of, I have this rule, is that, you know, like, you can only write about someone if they give you permission to, and they have to read the book through, and, you know, and say that's okay. So Holly, my friend, she's read it, you know, my mum. So anyone who appears in the book has read it, apart from my husband, who didn't want to. Like, or they've been given the opportunity to, and said, it's all right, I know you, and I know, and, you know, and I have a rule that I'm like, that I can't be cruel about people, you know, who are, so I think I'm, you know, I'm always very kind, and yeah, and I it's not, yeah, like, I don't just go around, like, plundering my life for books, although some people might think I do. It's like, I do it because I think it helps other people, and it's not it's not to like shock people, or you know, it's because I think it genuinely, and I know it does, you know, not wanting to sound all arrogant, it does help other people to, you know, in their journey of getting well. And I wouldn't write them otherwise. Do you know what I mean? Like, and also because it helps me, because every time I get a message from someone telling me their story, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not a freak. I'm not alone. You know, that's at the heart of all of my books, is like, I know there are other people out there who are as fucked up as me, but like, I don't feel like we're allowed to say we are. So I'm going to write this book in the hope that it encourages other people to say they are, and then we can all get together and be fuck ups together. Do you know what I mean?
So it's that Nora Ephron idea that all life is copy, but within reason, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. And and it's like, I'm not, you know, I don't, there's a lot that has not appeared in that book, Imogen.
Right.
You know, like,
Crikey.
you know, like, I chose very carefully what to put in, and I don't, you know, like, I don't feel that I have to tell everyone everything that's happened in my life, you know. I don't have to, do you know what I mean? Like, I
think I read in an interview with you that each of the scenes that are sort of upsetting or disturbing or whatever have been put there for a specific reason, as an example of how low you went, or how much you had to change your behaviour, or they were like full stops in your life, or so none of them are gratuitous. What I'm trying to say.
Well, also, I feel like, you know, you could just write a drunk-a-log, which is just all of the times you fucked up and all the stupid things you did. And, like, you know, great, people are always going to love to read that. But, you know, that wasn't the point. You know, the point was showing that you can turn yourself into a person other than the person that is just their drunk-a-log. Do you know what I mean? So
it's much more curated than yeah.
And I really, it's really interesting, because I think the thing that people, I think, go about is the beginning, which I still find difficult to talk about, which is a sort of an assault, essentially.
Yes, but it's brilliantly written, and it's heart-stopping, and it's very graphic, and it's there for a reason, and that's your rock bottom.
And also, the interesting thing is I've had a lot of people read it who are not alcoholics and are not addicts, and that bit has really chimed with them in times of like stuff that has happened, you know, when they've perhaps been on a night out, and you know, and those horrible, and that's interesting, because I remember, you know, like, so, you know, you don't have to be an alcoholic to experience these things, you know. And that was my rock bottom, and it was almost exactly 3 years ago to the day that we're talking, and
gosh,
but to think how far I've come.
Yes, well, you've come amazingly far. I mean, it's extraordinary. Can I ask you a question? How, you know, during COVID, well, we are still in COVID, but right at the beginning, there were endless memes about drinking, endless memes about wine o'clock, endless memes about, you know, this is high getting through. I mean, how have you coped with the stress of lockdown? I mean, it's all very well being sober in your normal life, but when you know, the walls are closing in, it must have been quite difficult.
Well, I think weirdly getting sober prepared. You know, I always say that what was interesting was that I think, and this is sort of the premise for my next book, which is that, like, actually I spent my whole life waiting for the world to end. Like, since I was about 9, I'm like, okay, is the world going to end this way, that way, this way, that way? I have plans. I have, you know, like, if the world really does then come to me, Imogen, and the zombies come, I know what will stick with me. I know the way out. You know what I mean? I know that. So, like, and then when it actually does start to end, and let's face it, the world as we know it has ended, like, you know, I was like, oh, I'm okay, because I'd gone through like the apocalyptic scenes in my head. I was like, I can cope with this. And it was really interesting that all the people in my life who I'd always seen as very like stable, they just cruise through life, breeze through it, like collapsed and were like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And all the people I knew who'd experienced sort of big mental health challenges were mostly quite calm. And actually, so that there was this curious inversion of norms. And I realized then that all of these awful things that happen to us, people that experience mental illness and all of that, we feel that they're failures and they're flaws, but actually really they're more like superpowers. Do you know what I mean? Because like we can, so no, I haven't found the last 6 months particularly like bright and breezy, you know, like it's been a bit shit, frankly, hasn't it? But like I'm you know, I now know that it's okay. Like whatever happens, even if it's not okay, we'll all
with it.
And I'm really glad I don't drink, because I just honestly, Imogen, I don't want to think what lockdown would have looked like with me, with, you know, oh, I'm just going to stay in the house all day, and like just awful.
Yeah, totally. I think some people have fallen off the wagon, I think is the expression, during lockdown, because I think they found it so incredibly stressful, and also you've been bombarded by these memes all the time, that it's been absolutely okay to start drinking at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and also I think that a lot of the usual support networks that people have to deal with this stuff have gone, you know. So you know, 12-step meetings, for example, have all gone online, and you know that they're great and I love them, but for some people it's not the, you know, it isn't like the real thing, and you know, and it's stressful. We are going through this intense period of uncertainty, you know, and
you're okay because you have you know, your son and your daughter there, but I mean, a lot of people are on their own, so I think that must have been incredibly difficult to work out how to fill your day. And
I just think it's been a shit show, but you know, I think we'll all work it out. We'll all work out how to get through it. And I hope, do you know what I really hope though, I feel like this summer sorry to get a bit like, I feel like this summer's been a bit of an illusion, and I feel like we've all gone out and me included, and been like, oh yeah, like everything's open back up again, I'm gonna go out for dinner and I'm gonna go away, and you know, and really I feel like it's been a sort of a bit of a break from lockdown, and I don't think we're going to get locked down again, but I do think that the road is going to be very, very bumpy for the next year, really. And you know, and we will have to work out how to get around it and how to deal with it and how to kind of survive life living with it, really. Yeah, it's interesting. It's very listening to this podcast to have my thoughts on COVID policy. You know,
but what's fascinating for me is your journey has been extraordinary. From I mean, a journalist and a columnist, and then you become sort of queen of the confessional memoir. You know, you sold millions and millions of copies, and now you've become the poster girl for mental health. I mean, that must be a very big responsibility, firstly, but also how does that feel to have become, you know, suddenly all your, it seems like it was all worthwhile in the end, if you see what I mean.
Well, I don't know if I'm a poster girl for mental health. I mean, like, madness was the only thing I was ever going to become a poster girl for. Put it that way.
But you have your podcast, and
I feel like
and you run your heads together, and you have your podcast, Mad World. I mean,
yeah. No. I know. I feel like it's so nice to be able to take the shit and try and turn it on its head into something positive, and really that in itself is like part of getting better for me. You know, I always remember chatting to Scarlett Curtis about it, and how activism was like a way for her to get out of her head and to, you know, and to challenge the norms out there of how we see people with mental illness and how we treat them. So for me, this has been it's all I really knew how, I don't know, like I can't explain it. I had to write this stuff down because I needed to see and meet other people like me, you know, but also because it feels like it's not all for, it feels really good connecting with people about this stuff after so many years of feeling disconnected. And like I always say, that the thing that all mental illnesses have in common is that they lie to you and they tell you that you're a freak and they tell you that no one else is going to understand what you're going through, and that's bullshit, you know. And the moment that you know, put a chink in that, and you're not cured, do you know what I mean, but you are on the road to recovery. And so for me, it's like a constant way of reminding myself that I am not a freak. I'm just another human being, and it's all okay. It's all okay, you know. And so I really love what I do, and I love chatting to other people about their experiences, and you know, trying to work out how you know, campaigns and things like that. And yeah, so it's a lovely thing to be able to do after, you know, quite a lot of just being floundering out there by myself, not really knowing what you know, what the point was to carry on, if that makes any sense.
Yes, yeah, it does. Do you get lots of letters from people? Do you get? I mean, I presume this book will absolutely ignite a lot of feedback, I'm sure.
Yeah, I get lots of I get heaps of messages, and that's why I do it, really. Like it's so it makes me feel more normal. And that's what, you know, like I think, you know, you mentioned the sort of confessional memoirs and everything, but I actually think I'm I spent my like whole life feeling like a bit of a freak, and actually through doing this work and writing this stuff, I've realized I'm pretty normal, and like so many other people out there. And I think that's what and it's certainly when I read messages from people, and it's like, because I set up this thing called Mental Health Mates nearly 5 years ago now, which again was this thing of like walking and meeting other people, like creating peer support groups for people with mental health issues. And it's I feel like I just constantly trying to connect with other people, right, like you, and realize that normal, whatever that is. But so yes, I do get lots of messages.
And have you and so you ran the London Marathon in your underwear, which was, I think, extremely brilliant and brave. But you now do lots of running events, don't you? Is that your new thing? Because I think you've just been jogging this morning.
I have, yeah. Well, no, I love running's very important to me. I'm not particularly good at it. I'm certainly not fast at it. But I need to do it. It's a kind of like to realize that the world is still spinning. Do you know what I mean? And like if I start my day with a little trot around my local common, it's like I've started the day with something positive and a commitment to myself. And you know, instead of waking up and thinking I'm going to go for a run and then go, I can't be arsed. And then my whole day is like, oh, you're such a piece of shit, Bryony. Why didn't you do that? So I love running, and it's been, you know, weirdly, running was kind of the thing that made me see that there was another way to live, you know. So I signed up to do the London Marathon in 2017, and it wasn't long after the London Marathon that I got sober, because first of all I thought, oh, I'll sign up to do the marathon, and that'll sort out my drinking. And I'm like, it didn't. Like, I stopped drinking for the duration of running the thing, but like I was like, on a Sunday I'd go and do my long run, and my husband would be like, you can't, just because you ran 10 miles doesn't mean you can have 10 pints. And I'd be like, au contraire, it absolutely does. And I realized, I was like, this isn't normal. This just isn't normal. But I also saw this other way of living that was like, that didn't involve just having to go to the pub to get high. You could like use your own feet to do it. I'm like, wow, that's bonkers and so much cheaper. So running is special to me, and yeah, and so I was supposed to be doing my 3rd marathon this year, but obviously COVID. So
Yeah.
I'll do it at the end of next year, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um,
So how many miles do you do a day then? Or do you don't count?
oh, I don't do like I did like 3 miles this morning,
Right.
and I'll probably do that like 3 times a week or whatever. I'm
Well,
not like it, but I don't do like massive distance running unless I'm training for something. Like even me just saying that sentence is like a different Bryony altogether.
so are you doing another book, do you think, or
I just started one, yeah,
what's that about then?
last week. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say,
Oh, okay.
but it's mental health. It's mental health. Um,
Is it
and
fiction or non-fiction?
it's non-fiction, and it hopefully will be my last non-fiction.
I mean, would you like to write fiction?
Yeah, I will after this one. I'm going to write young fiction for young adults. I'm going to write a book. Yes, for an imprint called Bellatrix, which creates a feminist fiction for young women. So that's quite exciting. So I don't know if I'll be able to be any good at it. It's very different to non-fiction, but I'm gonna have a go, and who knows.
Well, brilliant. Listen, Bryony Gordon, thank you very much for joining us today. And this is a work of genius, and I recommend it to absolutely everybody. Thank you so much. It's already in the top 10. Unbelievable.
Thank you, Imogen. Was that okay?